21 scholarships given out
Yeah.
yesterday.
I kids too, like, they're taking standardized tests on the computer. I would die.
Love it.
I don't know my mother's father. He was killed in World War I.
Joyce, I don't know. Here she is.
Hi, guys.
Died of muscular gas poisoning.
Crazy plans.
Not me.
There's no room up here for all that stuff. Whoop.
Knocking stuff down.
Just knocking it over.
Not mine.
It was a pink water bottle, right?
Yes.
Are we streaming?
Not yet.
yours?
Are we streaming? Yes.
We are. I thought the red light means you're not on. You are on.
You are on in the middle. I wish you switched.
Okay.
the button on the-
Why is it making so much noise?
Okay, there you go.
I hereby announce pursuant, in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-10, that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting has been transmitted on January 7th, 2022, and April 27th, 2022, by the Secretary to the Asbury Park Press, the Independent, the Two River Times, the Township Clerk, and has been posted on the bulletin board on the main access door to Township Hall and posted on the Township's website. If you would please join me and stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. I thought I saw Paul Kraus. I was going to ask him as a former chair to lead us, but he's not here. He's outside. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And please remain standing for a moment of silence to honor our military who have been wounded or killed in action, and for all our first responders who keep us safe every day. And today is Corrections Officer Day, so let's give a little extra prayer for them. Thank you. Roll call, please, Bonnie.
Mr. Ackerson?
Here.
Ms. Alfieri Collins?
Here.
Ms. Tomaso?
Here.
Mr. Emma?
Here.
Dr. Gilstein?
Here.
Mr. Castaning?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Mr. Lucarelli?
Here.
Ms. Plusas?
Here.
Mr. Nicholas?
Here.
Ms. O'Connor?
We have a full house. How happy am I? Okay. The first item on our agenda is completeness waivers for the Holmdel family apartments. However, we have some new members on the board, so the attorney and I felt it was best to perhaps go into executive session to bring the new members up to speed on the litigation that ensued, and then come back out. So it shouldn't be very long, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And so I need a motion to go into executive session. Jeff?
Second.
Joyce?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So if you'll excuse us for a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen, our original plan was to ask you to leave, but there's actually more of you than us, so we're gonna go upstairs.
Two stars in there? Sure.
We need our professionals as well, thank you. Oh, maybe I do.
We're all set. So, these will set up while they're doing that. We're next. I think we should use this one. It's a little tight. Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? Do you have a lot of exhibits?
Not a lot. I have them pre-marked and I have a set for you. Okay? I would put that on the floor. Okay.
Okay, there you go. So we're going to resume the meeting. Appreciate your patience. So our first item on the agenda is completeness waivers. Item 1, Holmdel Family Apartments, amended preliminary and final major site plan, 2020-02. It's Block 57, Lot 2, 625 Laurel Avenue. Proposal to construct 3.5-story multi-family building consisting of 50 COA units, along with the site improvements, including recreational facilities, on-site parking, landscaping, lighting, utilities, and stormwater management system. The property consists of 3.87 acres, and it is in the AHMF2 zone. We have representing here today. Can you state your name for the record? This is off. I just think that because of the sensitivity of this particular application, we want to make sure that everything is recorded properly. And, oh, there you go. Maybe if I just hold my finger on this and don't speak. Seems to have stopped, right?
So just as a preliminary to board members, Mr. Lucarelli is going to step down an abundance of caution based on the fact that there was litigation with the town and the board, and he just feels it more appropriate. So you step down, and we'll see you at the next application, which is you should be outside.
Not recording?
That's not recorded?
Okay. Okay, say it now. I have.
Okay, so just to repeat, Mr. Lucarelli is going to step down and recuse himself out of an abundance of caution, given his position as a councilman and the prior litigation with the township, with Hazlitt, not with the applicant, but in this matter. So we'll see you at the next meeting, next hearing. We'll text you.
We can text you, yes. Okay, and for those of you in the audience, I don't know which one it is, but here, I'm gonna. Oh, no, it's that one. It is that one. You moved your stuff and it's like that way. Yeah, that's on, even though it's, you know. I'll try that. Is there a push button to pull it out? Dimitri Oventopoulos, if you're watching, can you let us know if you can hear us clearly? Text Joyce. In any event, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you here, hopefully this is recording well. What we do is we go through completeness waivers, and that's just like a list of things that the applicant has to make sure that he has in order to proceed. So once we grant those completeness waivers, we allow the applicant to continue to the public hearing portion of the application. Many planning boards make the applicant come back another night. I do not do that. We do not do that. We feel it's you know, courteous to the applicant to allow them, since they have everybody here, to continue on. So after the, okay. Well, right, so we're gonna do completeness waivers, and then we're gonna move on to the public hearing. The public hearing, once that begins, everyone will be sworn in. And they will put on, the applicant will put on his testimony with all his professionals. And then I will allow you to ask questions of the professionals about what they testified to. And then after that, I will allow you to make comments on what, if you have something to say. If you are going to make a comment, you will need to be sworn in. So, just so we have all the rules set forward to start, okay? All right, so, floor is yours. Please introduce yourself for the record and continue on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Damian Del Duca. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Del Duca Lewis, and I represent the applicant Holmdel Family Apartments LLC. I have with me my client, Evan Spitel, who's with the Walters Group, which is affiliated with Holmdel Family Apartments LLC. We have Dan Doherty, our civil engineer, who's behind me, our architect, Mike Donovan, our traffic engineer, John McCormick. And during the public hearing, I expect that all of them will provide some testimony, but I realize we want to go through completeness first. So would you like me to go through that, or how?
Well, generally speaking, only the things that you do not agree with. If you agree with whatever the professionals have asked for, then you could say we'll do whatever they asked, and then we accept the
Understood. I have a letter from Mr. Euro dated March 28th relating to completeness, and we agreed to provide the items. We agree to the comments in that letter.
There are several items that I've noted in my March 28, 2022 letter. The first four of them in Section A are regarding filing data. Due to the township being the property owner, my feeling is those items are not needed at this time. Other two items regarding roads and roadways, since this is Middle Road's under jurisdiction, since it's under jurisdiction of Monmouth County, I have no problem with granting the waivers for that. And then the other items have been provided or will be provided during testimony. So I have no objection to the board granting the waivers that they've requested at this time.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, I need a motion to accept the completeness waivers. Okay. Bill and Joyce. Roll call, please. Oh, do we need, I'm sorry, we need to see Mr. Nicholas is number one, correct? For Mr. Lucarelli. No, he could stay there. Mr. Nicholas, you're going to be voting on this application because Mr. Lucarelli has stepped down.
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, so at this time, we'll go to item number 2, the public hearing for the Holmdel Family Apartments amended preliminary final major site plan 2020-02, Block 57, Lot 2, 625 Laurel Avenue, same description as previously given. Mr. Del Duca, you can have your, if you want to, let's swear in all our professionals, and then you can put your case on.
Thank you.
And we'll swear in our professionals too. Does everyone swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help us God? I do. Okay. Professionals have been sworn in, Mr. Euro, Ms. Beam, and then Damien, if you can just identify each one of
Sure.
them by name and title.
Our first, to my left, is Edmund Spitel, who is the representative of the applicant. Behind him is Dan Doherty with Dynamic Engineer, our civil engineer. Immediately behind me is Michael Donovan with Haley Donovan, our architect. Behind me and to my right is John McCormick with Dynamic Traffic, our traffic engineer. All of whom have been sworn. So if I may, Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I have some introductory comments that I think will help move this along more efficiently. There is some history to this application, and I think it's appropriate to give some context, especially because I know that some of you were not here when we were here for preliminary site plan in August of 2021. So the property is shown on the aerial exhibit that I've pre-marked as Exhibit A1. You can see it on the board, and I've handed out all the exhibits, 11 by 17 copies. I know you're probably familiar with the property. It's 625 South Laurel Road, Block 57, Lot 12. It's a vacant property, and it's 3.87 acres. The aerial photograph shows it and the surrounding areas. As you know, the Hazlet Township municipal boundary line runs to the north. Generally, the north is the top of the page here in this exhibit. South is to the bottom. The Hazlet Township boundary line runs to the north of the property. It's that purple hyphenated line on the aerial photograph, Exhibit A1. And that's the property that we're here for tonight. And we're here to present an application for approval for a family rental community that'll consist of 50 apartment units, and they will be deed restricted, and they'll be restricted to low and moderate income families, so-called 100% affordable application. And the Walters Group is an entity that's based in New Jersey that is primarily an affordable housing developer, and they have developed affordable housing communities like this proposed community all over New Jersey. I've handled most of those applications. I was with them last night in Chatham, and we've handled many applications throughout the state. And I think you'll see, and you saw before, although this is really a new application, that they're going to build a beautiful community here that will go a long way towards helping Holmdel satisfy its affordable housing obligations and provide very nice housing for people with low and moderate income. The application, as I said, has a history. We were here in August of 2021, at which time, 2020, thank you. It was 2 years ago.
I know, it seems like yesterday.
It's hard to believe. 2020, thank you. At which time we got preliminary site plan approval for the same number of units on the same property. But as you know, there was a challenge to that, which is why we're back tonight. This is a municipally sponsored community. What does that mean? A municipally sponsored community is one where the municipality, like Holmdel, collaborates with an affordable housing developer to bring an affordable housing community to Holmdel, to a specific location. And as you know, the law requires Holmdel and every one of the 565 municipalities in New Jersey to provide a realistic opportunity for its fair share of affordable housing. And so for me, for my client, where this process really began was when Holmdel entered into a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center, which is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to advocating for affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals and families. Fair Share entered into a settlement agreement with Holmdel, like it has with most municipalities in New Jersey, on January 11th, 2019. And in that settlement agreement, Holmdel agreed to support a 50-unit, 100% affordable community at this location. So in that settlement agreement, 3+ years ago, Holmdel agreed to put this density and this use at this site. They agreed to adopt zoning to create the necessary zoning to allow this community that we're here for approval tonight to become a reality. The Superior Court of New Jersey approved that settlement agreement, and it entered a court order known as a fairness order, an order after a fairness hearing on May 1st, 2019. So that settlement agreement essentially became a court order by extension. In order to fulfill its obligations under that agreement, Holmdel adopted an ordinance known as Ordinance 2020-06 on July 28 of 2020, creating a zone called, and it's a long name, the AFMF2 Affordable Housing Multifamily Zone 2. So essentially an affordable housing multifamily zone 2. And that ordinance is codified in section 3-135A of your ordinance. And I have a copy of that right here. And in that ordinance, Holmdel specifically permitted 50 units on this site and adopted various other requirements and regulations relating to this community. But that ordinance was written tailor-made for this site and the plan for this site. And in that ordinance, it says that the purpose of the ordinance is to provide an opportunity for the construction of a 100% affordable housing project with 50 affordable multifamily rental apartments on the property designated as the Block 57, Lot 2, which are intended to address the township's obligation to implement the settlement agreements with Fair Share Housing Center as part of the township's third round affordable housing obligation, so as to provide its fair share of the region's affordable housing need. So that ordinance was adopted in late July of 2020. We filed an application for site plan approval on August 3rd, 2020. But before that, I missed one step in the chronology. Back in December of 2019, Holmdel entered into an agreement with my client, Holmdel Family Apartments, LLC, known as a developer's agreement, in which the township agreed to acquire title of the property. They may have already had title at that time. They agreed to convey that property to the developer. They agreed to comply with the terms of the settlement agreement. They agreed to contribute $1 million towards the construction of this affordable housing community. And the developer agreed to build the community so long as it satisfied all the contingencies in that agreement, one of which was obtaining the necessary financing, another was to obtain the necessary land development approvals, which, spoiler alert, is why we're here tonight. So that happened on December 16th, 2019. That's when the developer's agreement was signed, and thereafter the town adopted the ordinance to permit this use and this density in this location. We filed our site plan application on August 3rd of 2020. We were scheduled and actually appeared before you virtually on August 18th, 2020. But on August 3rd, the same day we filed, I believe the same day we filed the site plan application, Hazlet Township filed an appeal in Superior Court appealing the adoption of Ordinance 2020-06 that created this AFMF2 zoning district. We proceeded on August 18th. Hazlet's attorney, Mr. Gorman, appeared at that hearing, objected to the granting of the application. The board considered his comments. The board granted preliminary major site plan approval to permit 50 residential apartment units at this site, and they had adopted a resolution the next month on September 15th, 2020, like you normally would for any application. We told you then that in order for this community to be a reality, we would need to apply to the New Jersey Housing Mortgage Finance Agency, known as HMFA, to get tax credit financing. Complicated financing, 9% tax credit financing that I don't fully understand, but essentially that tax credit financing is the financial engine that gets these communities built. Highly competitive, towns throughout the state apply for it. Developers like the Walters Group get sites approved. You have to have preliminary site plan approval as one of many requirements in order to apply for HMFA tax credit award. And they applied for a suburban family award. Holmdel got the award in November or December of 2020. The process is very competitive. There's a point system, and generally speaking these days, if you don't have a perfect score, need not apply because you won't win. If you have a perfect score, it goes to an elaborate tiebreaker system, and Holmdel in our application, which we collaborated with Holmdel on, was able to score well enough to get the tax credit award. Of course, there are always requirements. One of the requirements is that we have to put this community into service by late 2023. I don't have the exact date, but it's, I believe, the anniversary of when the award was made, which was late November or early December of 2020. And putting into service means we have to complete construction to get our first certificate of occupancy. So the clock is ticking on this application, and so we're very eager to come here tonight and to get this application heard and certainly hopefully approved. But we did get that HMFA award while the litigation was pending. Hazlitt also appealed this board's decision to grant preliminary site plan approval. They did that in late August of 2020. On January 6th, I told you this was a long history. In January 6th of 2021, at my client's request, the State Planning Commission took action to change the designation of this property. I'm just going to stand up. So when we came to you in 2020, one of the points that Hazlitt raised was that the State Planning Commission has a statewide plan that puts all property in different planning areas, and this property was in two, the suburban planning area and the metropolitan planning area. The significance of that is in the suburban planning area, you're only allowed 30% impervious coverage, but in the metropolitan area, you're allowed 80% impervious coverage. Hazlitt took the position that we didn't meet those requirements. That was one of several arguments that they raised. My client applied to the State Planning Commission and asked them to revise the planning area designation for this property so that the entire property would be in the metropolitan planning area, and they agreed to do that on January 6, 2021. The net result of which is that you're permitted 80% impervious coverage in that planning area. Hazlitt challenged that action as well by filing an appeal with the Appellate Division of the Superior Court. That was in early 2021. We spent the first half of 2021 litigating those cases, and ultimately we were able to reach a settlement agreement with Holmdel Township, and that agreement was executed by the final party on September 20th, 2021, and in that, amongst other things, and I'm not going to read it to you or give you a long summary, but I think the most important aspects for tonight's purposes are that Holmdel agreed to adopt an ordinance that would require the site plan to be modified to essentially move the parking lot and the buildings further away from the residents that abut the rear of this property that live in Hazlitt, to create more space. And one of the exhibits that I handed out is Exhibit A3, which is the plan you approved in 2020. And, excuse me, Exhibit A3. And this is the plan. You can see it's pushed up against the homeowners in Hazlitt. The reason for that was because that is the area that was in the metropolitan planning area where we had more coverage rights, we were entitled to more coverage, so we had to push it back further. And as a result of the revision of this, to the planning area and the resulting right to additional coverage on the overall site, we were able to modify the plan to pull away from those residents. And we agreed to do that in the settlement agreement with Hazlitt. My client was is a party to that agreement. This board's a party to that agreement, and the township of Holmdel is a party to that agreement, as is the township of Hazlitt. So in that agreement, I think the primary gist of that agreement is that the other parties in the case besides Hazlitt agreed that we would pull this site plan away somewhat from the property owners in Hazlitt. In order to do that, Holmdel agreed to revise Section 3-135A, this zone that we're in, to implement those changes, those setback changes. We agreed to significantly augment the buffer between the parking and the Hazlitt residents, and all that was codified in an ordinance known as Ordinance 2021-35, which was adopted on November 23rd, 2021, about 2 months after the settlement agreement was fully executed. The applicant immediately, well, as soon as they could, filed this application on January 4th, 2022. And this application, we called it an application for amended preliminary major site plan approval and final major site plan approval. And we agreed in the settlement agreement with Hazlitt that once this application is granted and unappealable, we'll withdraw the prior approval. Because we agreed that we would build out this plan as part of our settlement and our commitment to Hazlitt in consideration for the things that they did in that agreement. And so we're here tonight to seek that approval. And although I called it an amended preliminary, we did agree that we would withdraw that prior approval. So it's essentially should be considered as a new application. And we will treat it as such, although we'll try to do it as efficiently as we can to take as little of your time as we need to. The new plan has, as I mentioned, the primary changes are to pull the buildings away, further away from Hazlitt, pull the parking area that's in the rear or the north side of the site further away from the Hazlitt boundary, and to create a very significant buffer, which was specifically identified in the settlement agreement. We attached to the settlement agreement an exhibit, which I don't have on the board, but you have in your handouts. It's Exhibit A5. Excuse me. It was prepared by our landscape architect. Let me just identify that for the record, please. Prepared by Jonathan Alderson Landscape Architects, Inc. It's dated, last revised today, May 3rd, 2022. And this is just a later revision to the plan that we attached to that settlement agreement dated May 4th, 2021. And we agreed to planting heights, species, to try to preserve the existing buffer that's there. So that was all part of what we committed to do, subject, of course, to the planning board's approval, although I know the planning board reviewed that with its counsel as a party to that litigation. So those are the primary changes relating to Hazlitt. We also agreed to eliminate the driveway on South Laurel Avenue. So the prior approval had multiple driveways, one on Middle Road, one on South Laurel Ave. That driveway's not there anymore. Now the only access to the community is across from Lexington Court on Middle Road. It is a full access driveway. We have, to our knowledge, no variances that are required. We comply with all of your applicable ordinance requirements, with two possible exceptions relating to lighting, which our engineer will explain. When you apply to a planning board for site plan approval and you don't need any variances or any waivers, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously because it may not be something that everyone knows, but the law says that that application has to be granted. The purpose of site plan review isn't to give your subjective opinion or my subjective opinion as to whether this is good or bad, but it's a question of whether we comply with your ordinance requirements. And that's the first order of business. That's the primary order of business. And we're here tonight to demonstrate that we do. Your professionals' review letters, and I won't speak for them, but the review letters that I read, other than the lighting waiver that I mentioned, didn't call out any variances or design waivers. So we believe we comply with your ordinance other than that one exception. And so this is an application that we believe that we can establish can, should, and really must be granted. The review letters we did receive most recently, and there have been a series of them, most recently is Ms. Beam's letter dated April 4th, Mr. Euro's letter dated February 22nd. We don't have any objections to the comments in those letters. Mr. Doherty will correct me if I missed any comment on that, but I don't believe we do. We appreciate their working with us. This has been a long process, and from the municipal standpoint, we're really now at the final formal approval. Yes, any approval has conditions that we'll have to comply with, but this is one of the final steps in the process, and we're very anxious to start work so that we can put this community in service, comply with our obligations, and help Holmdel comply with its obligations. So the timing is really a critical component, and I wanted to share that with you. I've already referred to most of the exhibits, but just for the record, A1 is the aerial, A2 is the current proposed site plan dated May 3. A3 is the previous rendered site plan that you reviewed in 2020, dated August 18th, 2020. A4 is several pages of architectural elevations and floor plans. The first page is a rendering of our elevations. The second page of Exhibit A4 is a photograph of another community that has a very similar building. We wanted to show you what this really looks like with a photograph. And the final page or two of that exhibit is the floor plans. And then the last exhibit, A5, is the Alderson landscape plan, or what they call a planting plan, 2 pages, that we are presenting this evening. So thank you for your indulgence. I'm sorry for the long introduction, but I hope it'll cut down on some of the testimony and maybe some of the questions. If nobody has any questions for me, I'm going to ask our architect, Mr. Doherty, to provide the bulk of the testimony, and then the other witnesses will provide some brief testimony to fill in some of the gaps that I think you're going to want to hear, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
And just some housekeeping, so Bonnie, notices are in order, and just ask if anybody has conflicts with the applicant besides Mr. Lucarelli's concerns. He stepped down, or ask the applicant if they're aware of any conflicts with any of our board members.
No, I'm not aware.
And just to follow up on the summary that was given, so by law, we're required to have a hearing, a public hearing. We can't just settle these things, behind closed doors, so that's why the applicant is back here, although he indicated it's treat it like a full new application, but there's a court, Wishburne Woods, which requires us to have full public hearings with full public comment. So everything's out in the public as we proceed. But this is the result of a settlement between Hazlitt, Holmdel Township, Holmdel Planning Board, and the applicant. So everything that you've recited regarding that history is accurate.
Thank you. Hearing no other questions, I'm going to ask Mr. Doherty to step up to this
Right,
microphone.
One
and
second,
Yes.
Mrs. Del Duca.
Can you clarify why the second driveway was eliminated relative to the first?
Mr. Doherty will clarify that, or our traffic engineer. I think
Okay.
they'll do a better job. If you wouldn't mind just waiting a moment for that. Dan, why don't you take that and go to there, okay? Does that work for you? If you want to put anything down, it's good to go.
Mr. Doherty, you were before us previously in the August meeting,
August
and
August 2020 virtually.
Yes, and we accepted your credentials then. Does anybody have a problem accepting? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I won't go through your credentials, but you're a licensed professional engineer in good standing in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and were the site plans that have been submitted for approval prepared under your supervision?
Yes, I am. Yes.
And are you personally familiar with those plans and the site and the immediately surrounding area?
Yes, I am.
Were you present during my opening remarks?
Yes, I was.
Were they factually accurate as it relates to the plans?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, let's go to Exhibit A2, which is the current proposed plan, which is on the easel right now, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is just take us around the plan. We're going to start with access. I gave an overview of the primary changes. Were those accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Let's start with the access. We're proposing one driveway. Tell us how that will work and why we eliminated a driveway.
Sure. From the onset of this project, the layout, even for our previous one, previous to 2000, we had discussed among the team dual access or single access from Middle Road and also from South Laurel Avenue. On the original plan that we prepared, we chose to go with 2 access points, so we had a through movement. There were pros and cons on both sides, but we settled on that. We thought it was most flexible at the time. Currently, we're proposing only one access. It's directly across from Lexington Court. It's a full access driveway to Middle Road. The primary reason for the change and the removal of the driveway to South Laurel Avenue was for the reduction of impervious coverage for stormwater management design. This is directly related to the new NJDEP NJAC 7:8 stormwater regulations that just went into effect last spring, and based upon the new stormwater measures and BMPs that are available to designers, it was better for this application to have reduced the impervious coverage that driveway resulted in. And being that, it helped us sway our decision that we had previously made. There were no objections within our design team for the single access, so we moved in that direction.
And does the design of that driveway permit full movements?
Yes, it does.
Does that Is that on a county road or a municipal road?
That's county road. Middle Road's a county road, South Laurel Avenue is township, and have no access to that.
Okay. Does the design of that driveway satisfy all the county requirements to your knowledge?
Yes.
And is that county review of the access ongoing?
Yes.
Okay. Take us through the proposed circulation once you enter the site from that driveway.
Sure, it's a single driveway. and a
Mr.
single-
Doherty, I'm just going to ask you if you can maybe go from the other side so that the
Yeah,
planning
you're
board members
blocking
can see you.
Yeah. Why don't you, yeah.
Good.
I'm just gonna slide these a little so that you can move over here a little.
That's good.
Is that better so that we don't block the public?
Sure, I'll get on the side here.
Thanks.
So just to orient everybody on this plan, north is generally up. And we are entering from the northeast side of Middle Road. So if you're traveling northwest on Middle Road, you'd be making a right-hand turn into the site. If you're traveling southeast on Middle Road, you make a left-hand turn into the site. We're proposing a left turn bay per the county standards. The spacing on Middle Road works out very nicely because this coincides with the opposite left turn bay that turns into Lexington Court. So the pavement widths there work very nicely for us. So as you enter the site, again, it's a single driveway and a single parking lot aisle. Makes the site bend to the east and then goes generally east-west. It has parking on either side, just kind of a balanced, double-loaded parking layout. We've got landscape islands along the entire length, spaced about every 9 stalls, so that we have some street trees in those islands, and also freestanding light poles. And then at the east end, you pass first of all our buildings. Our first building is Building A. It's a clubhouse with 8 units. It's the smallest of our 2 buildings. And then on the opposite side of the parking lot, you pass Building B. That's 18 units. Again, these are 2-story buildings. And as you proceed to the east, you come across Building C. Again, on the right-hand side, 24 units in that building. Past Building C, towards the end of the parking lot, we have our trash enclosure. This is a trash enclosure for the entire facility. The residents will come to this facility, to the trash enclosure that actually has a doorway entrance to it. It's open on the top, but it's concrete walled, and it has compactors and dumpsters located behind concrete walls within there. And there's cutouts in those concrete walls, so as the residents walk into the trash enclosure, they can kind of walk down a little hallway, if you will. Again, it's open on the top. And they have cutouts so that the residents can put their garbage over the side of that cutout and drop right into the dumpster, which they're now elevated above. Kind of like a recycling center.
Let me interrupt you there, if I may. Does the circulation that you just described within that access and parking area meet all of the applicable ordinance requirements?
Yes, it does.
Does the parking meet all of the applicable ordinance requirements?
Yes, it does.
Does the ordinance require, how many spaces, 90?
Requires 90, we have 91.
Okay. Does the 3 buildings, how many units are in there total?
50 units total.
And that's what the ordinance requires and permits?
Correct.
Okay. What is the minimum setback from that parking area to the north to the Hazlet boundary line?
50 feet.
And what is the setback of Building A to the municipal boundary line?
39.3 feet.
Okay. What is the setback of all the other buildings to the Hazlet boundary line?
Approximately 175 feet.
Okay. And the minimum for that is required to be 100 feet, but we
Correct.
greatly exceed that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk about lighting. Does the lighting that's proposed meet all the applicable requirements?
Yes, it does.
And is it designed such that it will minimize or prevent any spillage of lighting onto adjacent properties?
Correct. The general design of the lighting and the type of fixture meet the design requirements. There are a couple of elements we require relief from, as was pointed out in the planner's memo.
Let's just talk about those now while we're on lighting. What relief do we require relating to lighting?
So there's 3 elements. The first element, a little bit of history. The lighting ordinance that we were originally here before you in 2000 has since changed. There was an element in that ordinance that was a little bit probably unreasonable, difficult to meet. It was like a 1-foot candle maximum requirement, which is nearly impossible to ever meet. Waiver after waiver after waiver. So the the township was very wise in revising that lighting ordinance to a more appropriate ordinance, unbeknownst to us in our resubmittal. So where we were previously granted relief from that ordinance, we now have a more appropriate ordinance, but we do still need some minor relief. So the maximum fixture height in the previous ordinance was, I believe, 20 feet. We had a 16-foot fixture, and now that's been lowered by the new ordinance to a 15-foot maximum pole height. And we have the 16-foot pole height. Again, a de minimis difference of only 1 foot. I can go into some more discussion on that in a moment, but the difference in that foot, not that it would make a consequential difference in your lighting design, but it might make a difference in some of the other statistics that I'll go on to talk about in a moment. So the next 2 items are ratios. The way you balance a lighting design is to balance the minimums compared to the average lighting levels. And that way you're sure to have a difference that's not from minimum to average, that's not too much, so the human eye doesn't have to adjust too much. And there's also, so there's 2 things there. There's the, let me just grab my notes. It's a uniformity requirement. So the first one is an average to minimum uniformity requirement of a ratio of 4 or less. So what that means is that the minimum lighting level on the site is no less than 1/4 of the average, okay? Very similar to that, you have a maximum to minimum uniformity ratio of 10. Same thing. The lowest lighting level on the site is no less than 1/10 of the maximum lighting level. So you try to keep those numbers together so that the human eye has the ability to adjust.
And how do we not comply with those?
So the reason we don't comply comes down to what our minimum is. So our minimum lighting level is 0.4 foot candles, where our average is 2.42. So that results in an average to minimum uniformity ratio of 6.05. I know that's a crazy number. It doesn't really mean anything. But just to give you an idea of where that comes into play, our lighting levels that are 0.4, our minimum lighting levels, are along the northern portion of our parking stalls, not even the full parking stall, maybe the northern 4 or 5 feet of those parking stalls. The reason being is we've pushed the light fixtures that are lighting this side of the parking lot to the south ends of those islands to keep the light away from our neighboring properties to the north in Hazlitt, and to avoid any spillage. Now, we don't have any spillage. There was never really a threat of spillage at 50 feet, but we still wanted to maintain the fixtures as far away from the neighboring properties. So that being the case, this 0.4 minimum that's realized at the front of your car as you're parking in a head-in stall isn't really realized by the user. So if you were to take that away and say only use the back halves of our stalls, we'd be completely conforming. We'd only need a 0.6 minimum to meet that 4 ratio. So in this case, and the reason that you have these design elements is for when these minimums and averages happen in the middle of a parking field, and you're actually realizing the minimum maybe in the middle of a parking aisle or in between fixture poles. That's not the case here. Our minimums are on the perimeter of where we're lighting, as opposed to in the middle of our field.
Okay, so why are our light standards 1 foot higher than the ordinance permits?
Simply because that's what was our previous design under the previous ordinance.
Excuse me, just to clarify, so if you just move those lampposts from the stalls on the southern part of the stalls, 1, 2, 3, looks like 5 lights, yes?
Yeah.
To the back, you would be compliant.
We'd most likely be compliant to move them back and closer to the property. Yeah.
So moving them south actually is better for the Hazlitt
Yes.
neighbors.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the buff.
Before you go forward, you also need relief from for the max to min ratio as well.
So very similarly, in order to meet, I'll go through this quick numbers very quickly. It's a maximum of 10 that's required, and we're coming in at they happen to be similar numbers, so I apologize. Our maximum is 6.0 foot candles. Our minimum again is 0.4 foot candles, so our ratio is 15, where 10 is required. If we wanted to meet the 10, we'd again coincidentally need a 0.6 minimum foot candle. It's the exact same or explanation for that relief. Very strange coincidence.
Madam Chair, I take no exception to the relief. I just wanted him to put it on the record.
Thank you. Let me move on to the buffer on the north side of the property. The settlement agreement states that the existing naturally occurring vegetated tree line along the municipal boundary line with Hazlet shall not be disturbed, except as otherwise noted on the attached concept plan, which is similar to the plan that's before you.
That's correct.
Have we attempted to maintain the existing naturally occurring vegetated tree line in that area to the north?
Absolutely. We've pulled all our proposed grading and earthwork as far south away from the property line as possible, so as to not have any impact or have any limited impact to vegetation along the northern property line.
And does this rendering, Exhibit A2, incorporate the plantings that are shown on the Alderson plan dated, marked Exhibit A5?
Yes, they do. Just only slightly exceptions where the previous plan had the dry. Oh, I'm sorry. You're correct. Yes, you're correct.
Okay. And I don't want you to go through every specimen and every detail, but can you give everybody here an idea of the quality and the quantity of that buffer between our parking lot and the northern boundary line?
No, it's an excellent designed buffer. Alderson used both shade trees, ornamentals, and also evergreen shrubs throughout that corridor to provide a buffer. Again, this is in addition to the existing plantings we'd be preserving along that property line.
And Exhibit A5 shows every type of species and the number and a legend letting everybody know what those species are, correct?
That's correct.
And that's a plan that was approved by Hazlet Township as a party to the litigation, not as an application for development, correct?
That's correct. It was an exhibit to the settlement agreement.
Okay.
Landscaping plan, but is it going to be irrigated?
Yeah, typically, yes. Yeah, they would propose an irrigation well for irrigation
All right,
wouldn't be city
because-
water.
All right, I don't want to see dead trees and the loss of buffers for the Hazlet residents. I want it maintained.
Understood.
Yeah, we would have no objection to that as a condition of approval. Let me write that down. Okay, so the rest of the landscaping for the site plan, does it comply with all applicable requirements?
Yes, it does.
And is that accurately depicted on the rendering that is Exhibit A2?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Stormwater, don't want to spend too much time on the details unless there are specific questions, but can you give everyone a brief overview as to how we're going to manage stormwater?
Sure. We've got a proposed, it's a constructed wetlands. It's one of the new best management practices in DEP's most recent regulations. It's proposed just south of Building B in this kind of triangularly shaped property between Middle Road, the back of Building B, and the Middle Road Shopping Center. That's our neighbor. Basically, what a constructed wetlands is a very limited small wet pond. You might see in previous developments through the 80s and the 90s, wet ponds were much more frequently used. This is a kind of a miniature version of that, where you do have some permanent water surface that is then enhanced with wetlands plantings on either side of it. And then when the stormwater, when the basin receives stormwater and storm flows and detains that stormwater, the surface of the water rises and then starts to inundate other levels of that basin to provide another facet or another different type of wetland terrain. So the area that you see in blue here on our exhibit is the actual pond area. The majority of this area is only about 18 inches deep. There's a requirement for a pool area. That's this rectangular area. You see, although you see that here, you would never see that. That's below the water, and there it's about 3.5 feet deep. Again, it's a new element from DEP's regulations that we're pretty excited about using, and we actually are currently under review with them for the stormwater under CAFR regulations.
And as far as you know, does that stormwater design comply with all applicable municipal and state regulations?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Doherty, just for clarification, there will be approximately 18 inches of standing water in the majority of the pond, and then in the smaller portion, about 3 feet of standing water
That's
at
correct.
all times?
That's correct.
Any provisions for any fencing or protection around the features?
Yes, there's fencing around the entire perimeter.
What kind of fencing is it?
I believe we have split rail fencing and, split rail fencing around the whole perimeter.
And is there any kind of a mesh or anything?
Yes, with wire mesh.
All right, so it's easily accessible from any emergency personnel, if anybody needs to access it on an emergency basis?
That's correct. You know what,
Thank you.
I just
But
want to correct
protected
that.
for for children that may live there.
It's actually post and rail, not split rail.
Oh, post and rail.
Yeah,
With mesh though in between. Okay, great.
And how about mosquitoes?
Well, the whole idea is that the water, we actually have to perform a water budget, which is a calculation and based upon the anticipated rainfall for both dry years and months and wet years and months, so that you get turnover in that water surface. So the idea is that because of the turnover on the water surface, the change in volume, it alleviates the concerns for mosquitoes for the most part. It's always moving.
Because it's always moving?
Again, you have a smaller volume. It's not the same scenario where you have a much larger volume of water.
I apologize for bouncing around, but one of the requirements of the settlement agreement is that the lighting levels at the Hazlet boundary line shall not exceed 1-foot candle. Do we comply?
Yes, we do. We're at 0.
Okay. Will the plan changes compared to the plan approved in August of 2020 have any adverse impact on the surrounding properties or the roadways?
No.
Okay. Are there any adverse stormwater management impacts as a result of the changes to the plan that you just described?
No.
There is an existing drain pipe that runs from Hazlet across the subject property, correct?
That's correct.
Is it correct that the applicant has agreed, as part of the settlement agreement with Hazlet, to replace that drain pipe with a new pipe in the existing in the same location as the existing pipe?
That's correct.
And also to record an easement to allow that pipe to remain there?
That's correct.
Is it correct to your, well, I'll save that for Mr. Donovan. We are raising the grade of this site, as I understand it, approximately 3 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why?
Basically for stormwater management elements, the existing site is rather low-lying. We have wetlands along our southern perimeter at the rear of the Middle Road Shopping Center. That results in shallow seasonal high water table. From a stormwater management design perspective, the seasonal high water table is your starting point for being able to design a basin. DEP requires certain separation between seasonal high water table and your design element. Part of the reason we went with the constructed wetlands in this case is that we're allowed to be closer to the seasonal high water table and sometimes in the seasonal high water table. So we've really taken design consideration to minimize that change in grade and also expense for construction to import fill.
And that change in grade doesn't implicate any deviations, exceptions, or variances, correct?
No, sir.
Okay. And it's my understanding that remediation is required for some historic pesticides, is that correct?
That's correct. The previous use here was a nursery where there was both planting and storage and use apparently of some pesticides.
And is it your understanding that that remediation is ongoing and will eventually be completed?
That's correct.
Is there any adverse impact to the wetlands associated with this proposed community?
No, there's as I mentioned, there's actually a ditch that goes along our property line at the rear of the Middle Road Shopping Center. It extends from a pipe that goes underneath Laurel Avenue, and then going upstream into our site about 3/4 of the way through our site, where it ends. That's been delineated and submitted to DEP for a letter of interpretation. The eastern portion of that ditch has been determined to be intermediate resource wetlands, and the latter, probably the last 25% on the western portion of that ditch are ordinary resource wetlands, meaning there's no transition area or buffer associated with it. So the interesting thing is that under existing conditions, I'm just going to refer back to A1. The previous nursery had a driveway coming in from Middle Road that had a semicircular parking aisle and parking lot, kind of like a smiley face there, and then another driveway exiting onto South Laurel Avenue. the limits of this parking lot that's there today goes right through the transition area for the wetlands. So although there's wetlands there with transition areas assigned, the majority of them are asphalt right now. So as part of our application, we'll be removing those asphalt areas and actually putting back transition area or buffer areas to the wetlands that weren't there. So it's a huge benefit.
Okay. Signs. Briefly, do we propose any signs, and if so, do they comply with the applicable ordinance requirement?
Yes, we're proposing one monument sign along the middle road frontage, and it complies with the ordinance requirement of maximum, I believe, 12 square feet.
And it complies with any setback requirements as well?
Yes.
Okay. Now, would you agree, Mr. Doherty, that the proposed plan this evening is significantly better than the plan that this board approved from an off-site impact standpoint?
Yes.
Is it correct, just to sum up, that this plan, Exhibit A2, complies with all applicable known Township of Holmdel requirements other than the lighting waivers that you've described?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Doherty. Madam Chair, that's all the questions I have for Mr. Doherty at this
I have
point.
a question. On the basin of water, what runs into that? Like all the roof runoff?
yes.
All the runoff from the driveway?
All the collected runoff from our site, so it's all of the pavement surfaces and the rooftops, and any grass areas that are surrounding those areas in tributary. Because we're filling the site, the areas to the north of us won't be tributary into the parking lot because we'll be above it. So we've proposed a new stormwater system to pick up those areas and bring it around right to South Laurel Avenue. So this whole side of our site is picked up separately and brought to South Laurel Avenue.
And what is the subsurface of that basin that you created?
The subsurface, it's a mixture. It's a soil mix.
Okay. That you're putting in, or is just
Yes.
the natural soil?
Yes, that we're putting
Okay,
in.
so it's like a giant dry well.
It's more of like a organic soil mix for planting, yeah. In certain areas, it's going to have, the pool area is going to be like a riprap and a gabion baskets. That's all below the water surface, so you don't see them. But the perimeters are all planted. They're planted down to a depth of 18 inches. So there's actually plants that Mr. Alderson's office, he's not here tonight, designed to be in those depths, at those depths, in order to thrive.
Question, comment. I see where the stormwater report was modified on page 7, I believe. Runoff rate reduction for the 100-year.
Correct.
It used to not meet the minimum. The allowable disturbed runoff rate was 11.2. The previous iteration of this did not meet that. Now it's showing that you do meet it. What caused the change, and how did you remediate the fact that it didn't meet it?
I'm not sure if that might have been, this goes back to the original 2000 report. Is that right?
The date of the report is, it was revised April 2022, so it's hot off the press.
I apologize. That must have been a typographical error. We've met the 100-year continually, and basically that's just a matter of your outlet control structure. So there's a box here. As you might see when you pass any stormwater basin around, you'll see a concrete box, and it's got some openings in it. And the idea is those openings are sized and put at an elevation to constrict flow that goes through the box and then down through the pipe.
So you're testifying that it was a typographical error?
It must have been. But
But you didn't do any design changes?
No, because we wouldn't plan to not meet the 100 years reduction.
Yeah, okay, understood, thank you. And I have another question that's hasn't been discussed, but I understand there was chloridane found on the site, and that there's does your firm have an LSRP to address that?
Although my firm provides those services through an affiliate of ours, we are not the LSRP on this project. But that is my understanding as well, that there's been contaminants associated with the previous use that have been found that are being remediated and removed.
And based on your knowledge, not perhaps specific to this site, how is that remediated?
I can't. I'm not an LSRP. whether for this site or another one, so I can't provide you expert testimony on that.
Well, so
Typically by removal.
The application would be contingent upon the DEP signing off on the remediation plan?
So there is an amendment to the developers agreement, I believe, and Mr. Spitel, who's gonna be my next witness, can confirm or refute this when he testifies, that obligates the developer between us and the township, which currently owns the property, to remediate those conditions in accordance with all applicable requirements. And we understand, and that can be a condition of approval, but we've already agreed to do it in a separate agreement with the governing body. I don't know the specifics of the remediation, how it's going to be accomplished. That'll be dictated by our LSRP, and obviously will have to be in accordance with the rules.
For the audience, can you enumerate LSRP?
A licensed site remediation professional. And in New Jersey, not too long ago, we went to a self-certified cleanup system, whereas many cleanups don't have to be expressly approved by DEP. These licensed professionals direct the cleanup, and they sign the final letter, which is called an RAO, and they put their license on the line that all the remediation's been done in accordance with the applicable rules. These reports get audited from time to time, so DEP checks on them, but these LSRPs aren't going to sign anything unless they're confident that the remediation's been done, and that's the way this remediation is required to occur, through an LSRP.
So I still think it needs to be a condition of the approval.
That's fine. Joyce, you had a question?
Yes, I have a question. I have another concern. How are the fire engines and emergency vehicles going to turn around if there's a fire? Because I notice your dump trucks come in, they back in, they pick up the garbage,
Right.
and they leave. But a fire engine doesn't have that luxury. They're there on an emergency.
Yeah, and exactly that. So they would use that same space to make the same turnaround and leave, or depending on where the fire engine is and if they've got fire police there, if they happen to be near the entrance, they could back out into Laurel Avenue. But it meets all of the access and fire access requirements that are supported by the building code and also by
Because
residential site improvement
I see the
standards.
the proposed fire hydrants, one on
Right.
either end of. What about a turnabout? Because wouldn't, like, impervious, like, to avoid your impervious coverage, would impervious pavement work for a turnabout at the
The
far
Grass Creek,
end?
perhaps Grass Creek?
Yeah, the grasscrete actually ends up counting as impervious surface, so it doesn't help us from that standpoint. There's also a grade separation that begins in this lawn area as we go down to South Laurel Avenue. Again, with the
My concern is more not even the fire engines, because they're fighting, but it's the ambulance.
yeah, so
in and
if
out.
an ambulance needed to turn around, they couldn't use available parking stalls because of the size of the vehicle. It's not too difficult. The entire area in front of our trash enclosure is wide open for emergency vehicles to utilize to make a K-turn and come back out the other way.
If I may, sir, you mentioned a condition of approval for the remediation. We have no objection to that, but Mr. Spitel just made a point to me, and that is the timing of that remediation. We can't commit to complete the remediation before we take title. It'll have to be before, it should be a condition of a certificate of occupancy, because it's going to happen in part during our construction, and we won't have our financing until we take title, and therefore it has to happen that way. Most conditions of approval have to be satisfied before we put a shovel in the ground to build this community. We can't do that here, so I would just ask that that condition be clarified, and that's consistent with our agreement with the township as well. So thank you.
Okay, that's
Bill,
fine.
you okay with that? I'm okay. Yeah. And we'll make it clear that we're not going to conflict with the developers agreement. If they have language, we don't want to obviously supersede
Fair
that.
enough. Thank you.
So, to follow up on Joyce's question about these are, what kind of trees are these? Is that the end of,
They're shade trees.
I mean, no, because to her point, I mean, I know, so you have the same two shade trees here, like I mean, I know you're trying to make it, but it will make it difficult. I teased Joyce earlier saying that I can drive the ambulance backwards very well, but not everybody's me. So, you have to worry a little bit about
Well, so,
you
so
know, with
these-
vehicles being parked there.
So the trees wouldn't conflict with the vehicle movement. They're shown over a 8 or 9 foot wide island that's underneath it. So if you look on the site plan, you'll see this whole area, the entire frontage of the trash enclosure is wide open. The trees just kind of,
So I guess the concern is the clearance, right?
Yeah.
So
well, the canopy's going to have to be kept to 10 or 12 feet because it's accessed by the trash vehicles
So-
directly.
I would recommend we make that a condition,
Sure.
should the board act favorably, that at a minimum, those trees around the trash enclosure that will be used for the turnaround, that the canopy be a minimum of 12 feet to make sure you have clearance to come in and turn around.
Sure.
It's the ambulance and even the fire truck, they have, you know, the antennas on top of them, so,
Right.
Sure.
Is the
thank you.
Grasscrete driveway on
We're
South?
we're not proposing any
You're-
grass.
What, I'm asking you,
Oh, okay.
can we put that in there? It was there before. There was an actual driveway before in a.
There was a full driveway
Right.
before.
In lieu of that full driveway, what about a Grasscrete for emergency vehicles?
Yeah, if I can just address that. We looked hard at that, and, you know, we believe that the vehicles can get in and out appropriately. I'm really reluctant to agree to that change because I don't want to deviate too far from this plan for reasons relating to the history of this case, where it's not necessary. And I know that's certainly the question, right? Whether it's necessary. I asked Mr. Doherty and his team to look at that closely, and we think that the vehicles can get in and out
What happens if
without
there's an
emergency
issue-
access.
What happens if there's an issue in the driveway and there's a car on fire in the driveway? You can't get in and out. So, you
Right.
know, I don't think it's an unreasonable request to have emergency access. I mean, you don't have a boulevard access, it's one access point, and what happens if it's blocked?
Yeah, I didn't mean to suggest it was an unreasonable request. Are you saying there's a car on fire in the driveway and the buildings are on fire?
Or what happens if there's a car on fire in the driveway and someone's having a heart attack in one of the buildings? And the ambulance can't get past because you don't have a boulevard access, which is usually the answer for, you know, you can always go on the other side because it's a boulevard. You don't have that. I don't understand what the reluctance is before you had a secondary access point. You know, and I have to ask, was that something that the township asked you? Because I looked into that and that is not what I found, so, and then the testimony was you didn't provide it because it was a drainage problem, so why are you not providing
Well,
the secondary access?
So it's a stormwater issue. We comply with RSIS, and frankly, I'm trying to limit the deviations to the plan, to the prior concept plan. I'm not saying we can't. I'm
Right.
just saying we shouldn't do it unless it's really necessary. And obviously, we all care about fire safety, but this does comply with RSIS. We're concerned about the additional stormwater, especially where we think the plan reasonably provides for it already. That was our thought process.
I mean, I don't wanna speak for the board, but I think they're concerned about the lack of secondary access and would feel more comfortable if there was emergency access out to Laurel.
I mean, we've had some testimony about impervious coverage. Are you at the maximum impervious coverage on the property, or can you put we're not saying have an access, we're not saying have it all the time access. We're asking
Understood.
that there be some kind of emergency access, perhaps with a chain link or something, or just we know about it, that it's there if we need to use it, you know, that
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of
not.
thing.
I wouldn't be really concerned with the chain link, aside from any administrative concerns that Mr. Del Duca might have. I'm not really concerned with the chain link or the grass pavers themselves. My concern is that we're under CAFRA review, and typically the grass pavers count as impervious surface, which have a higher runoff coefficient. Which, in this case, where we're elevating a site and trying to collect every drop that we can to get through our stormwater system to show the reductions, you know, if we add any more runoff that's not collected to the site, that's really that's why that was.
Where are you on the percentage of coverage right now?
It's not on. It's not a percentage. It's for it's the runoff that
I understand, but the question was,
Oh.
where are you on your coverage with
we're
CAFRA?
under 40%. We're at 40%. We're 80.
Right, but typically, when you have one point of access, you have a boulevard, which separates the in and out. So if there's an issue, you use the other side. Here, there's no separation. And I think the concern is for emergency vehicles, you know, first it was, so really, ultimately, it's a drainage issue. And if they're at 40% coverage and they can go to 80, adding an emergency access, like landscape paver access out to Laurel, which would only be used by an ambulance or a fire truck in the event of an emergency, like, there's really no rationale why you would not be able to provide it.
Well, I mean,
You can design the drainage to accommodate it. You had it before.
And I don't, I don't want to beg the question, but the stormwater regs have changed since our last application, so.
But, I mean, you had dual access before, and I think that's something that is concerning.
But
So, you know, we're not
It's just that the
asking for-
regulations are very different now and much more restrictive
I
on,
get it.
on how we can construct
Yeah.
a basin.
Our primary concern is changing the CAFR permit application for that reason. That's our primary concern.
Did you submit a CAPA permit already?
Yes?
And you don't have it though, correct?
No, and as I mentioned earlier, it's a race. Now, obviously, you can't sacrifice safety for time, we understand that. But,
I mean, I'll leave it to the board, but if you guys feel like you want that secondary access, other than them having to amend a permit application that they have not yet received approval on, there's really no reason why they can't provide it.
Well, I just don't want to say amend. It would change the stormwater runoff that we're unable to collect. It would increase the stormwater runoff that we're unable to collect and detain. So if I can increase pervious surfaces or impervious surfaces that are up where my project is and collect it and bring it into my new basin, then I can detain those and control them. But the driveway would be going down slope from the parking lot to Laurel Avenue. So if there's any increase in that runoff amount, I don't have the opportunity to detain it. And that's the that's the designer's answer right there.
It counts as impervious
it
coverage.
counts, yeah.
So just for clarification, Mr. Doherty, if you went with the egg crate style, which is pretty much filled with soil and grass, and
Right.
it's supported by a high-density plastic, almost like an egg crate, you're telling us that that would count towards your impervious coverage?
It's not that it would count towards impervious coverage. That would have an increased or a higher runoff coefficient, which means it generates more runoff during a storm event.
Towards Laurel Avenue?
Towards Laurel Avenue, uncollectible.
Which is uncollected?
Yeah. That's my honest, concern. Because I can't control that. Once I can't bring it into the basin, I can't make any of my outlet control structure different anymore. That's all going off-site.
So is there a level that you have to meet for that?
A level?
Like, is there a
Yeah,
number that
it's
you
the
have to
runoff
meet?
rate reductions in our stormwater report. Yeah, it's the runoff rate reductions, so it comes down to,
So how much wiggle room do you have in your runoff rate reductions?
we're right at it. Yeah, we're right at it. Yeah, and that's with our smallest opening in our outlet control structure, meaning you have an opening that's this big, I can't make it any smaller to function. And so I'm reducing the amount of, it's not the water that's going out the outlet control structure of my basin that's changing my rate reductions. It's all the water I can't collect because we're elevating the site. So, no, it's below the basin already. Yeah, I can't collect it.
If you were to provide that access, how would you prevent anyone from using it?
With chain posts, that's typically what's done. So you have two posts with a chain between, and it's for fire access only. So you'd have one down at South Laurel Avenue and then one at the end of the driveway. It's typical, right? And I don't know if you guys use a lock.
I'm sorry?
They have like a Knox box or a lock. The firemen have a lock.
Yes, we have,
yeah.
we have several areas we have several other streets that have that on there,
You can have a
just
lock
for
on
that
the chain.
reason.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Will traffic be discussed a little bit later?
Yes.
Any impact on traffic?
And Mr. Doherty isn't going anywhere, and we can continue to answer questions.
So, let me just ask you this, how solid is the ground there? Like, so
Well-
if we removed a tree or two for now, right, like if we moved a tree just so that if we needed to, a fire truck could just drive straight out, or,
It's really more a matter of slope of ground.
you understand what I'm saying?
I sure do.
Right, if they just, I mean, in an emergency, you're gonna drive where you need to drive, right? So, except if there's a big tree in the way. then that kind of is counterintuitive to 92 ambulances. Saying. Like what's the caliber of those trees? How big will they get? Like, will we be able to maybe do something like that?
Once, forget about coverage, we're raising the site here, and then we have a grade down to South Laurel Avenue. And right now, that grade's at a little bit more than 10% of slope, from a lawn area perspective. So, even with grass pavers, it's pretty steep. I mean, that's the steepest that you'd design a driveway at on a shopping center with regular asphalt. If I got past...
Unless you live in
stormwater
Holmdel,
part-
and then they're just like crazy steep, so try to get the...
yeah,
caught up
correct,
to-
in some areas. That back South Holland Road, I understand. But yeah, so that's like your very steep road. Now you're putting it on like a grass paver strip if it was that type, whether it's the egg crate type, which really doesn't have a lot of traction for vehicles. I'd have concerns. It's not a flat graded driveway.
I suppose we could. I just think that, if there's truly an emergency, as long as there's not necessarily have grass creep, but if you can get past the trees, if there's a big tree in the way, like, quite honestly, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, because he's our police officer here, like, if it's needed to be, the police and the fire department are gonna drive wherever they need to drive to get to put out the fire, right? Or to do whatever they need to do. So if they have to drive but if there's trees physically in the way, that's the problem. So my question is, could we move those trees so that maybe,
These trees, is that
No.
weird? These are at the end?
yeah,
Here?
that one.
Oh, okay.
Like, you know what I'm
yeah.
saying? I'm just trying to make it so that
We-
possibly
We could
ever.
relocate any of the
Because,
proposed
I mean,
plantings,
if we're
that's no
being
problem.
serious, the odds of somebody having a heart attack and a car fire at the same time are really kind of slim, but, it can happen. Would you agree they'll just drive where they need to? Unless there's a big tree in the way. Right.
Okay. So, one of the things we just huddled up internally, and thank you for your consideration, is, let me stand up. To address the concern that, to put a, she mentioned the boulevard, either as a narrow landscape island or an island very narrow down the center line from the Parkway Middle Road to right where the parking spaces begin, so that I'm on the in, you're on the out, we're never blocking both. We think we can do that without adversely impacting our CAFR permit application. Would that be satisfactory?
I like that idea. As well as taking a tree out.
Yeah, we can do that. Take this tree out. Yeah.
It's just there and we'll be able to get through without.
Yep.
I doubt they're gonna, can't doubt very much, but, it's just, there's a tree, you can't drive there.
Understood.
Okay.
Understood.
So, just to clarify, the applicant would agree to a condition of approval that for the throat length of the driveway on Middle Road, we'll add a narrow boulevard so that there's a division between ingress and egress in that driveway. And we'll also agree to remove the one tree along South Laurel Ave.
Whatever you think would make.
Right.
We'll relocate the two shade trees on South Laurel Avenue. We won't remove them from the plan. We'll put them elsewhere.
Relocate,
Yeah.
good, better.
Whatever you think works, so that if there needs to
Yep.
be.
Understood.
All right, thank you.
And run the bulldozer over that area quite a bit.
Unless there are any other questions for Mr. Doherty, I'm going to have Mr. Spital provide some testimony about the operation.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, just a couple things.
Sure.
Mr. Doherty, in accordance with my February 2022 letter, I know the attorney had provided some statements, but do you have any problems with the comments that are listed, and can they be accommodated on the plans?
I have no objection to any of your comments.
Okay. Just a couple specifics, just to get on the record. I'm showing on page 3, item number 6. Are the parking spaces to be specifically assigned to any units for the unit owner or guests?
Mr. Spital will address that.
All right, thank you very much. Community center, I'm assuming, is just going to be for residents only?
Same thing.
Okay. And school buses anticipated, are they coming onto site, or are they going to be picking up on Mineral Road?
Well, we don't control the school bus circulation. First of all, there's between us and the actual determination of routes is both the Board of Education and I don't know if the township has their own school buses or if it's a vendor. It's a vendor, so usually that's determined by the vendor. What we've found in our sites, Mr. Spital could speak to this as well, is that the sites that don't have a through movement, usually the school buses have their bus stop outside of the driveway of the site or the interior roadway of the site.
Okay, thank you. And then one last question. Can you just give a quick update on your outstanding approvals? Because I do know, as been mentioned several times, timing is of essence, and you have a lot of long leads on some
Sure,
of these agencies.
we are before CAFRA right now. We are also before Monmouth County. That review is pending. Monmouth County, or sorry, Freehold Soil Conservation District will probably be submitted the end of this week, if not sooner. Bayshore Regional. Bonnie just handed me the signed TWA applications, so that's going to them as soon as possible. So we'll have a treatment works approval as part of this that goes to DEP. But first, we need the endorsement of Bayshore Regional Sewage Authority, as well as payment of our connection fees, which will be happening as well.
Okay, and obviously these will all be conditions of the approval.
Indeed.
Understood.
One last question. Can you just, I can't find it. I see it on A3 on the original plans, but not on A2. Can you just point out the proposed fire hydrant locations?
Sure. You know, they might be masked. There's one at the northwest corner of Building B. And there's another one at the northeast corner of Building C.
They're not labeled as proposed fire hydrants, though, right?
No, they're by symbol. Within the plan set, they should just be by symbol.
Thank you.
No problem. We did receive fire official comments on our original application, which were generic in nature. We agreed to comply with those. I don't believe we received a new review under this most recent one.
Thank you. Why don't you put that over there? Thank you. Why don't you put that there? You want to sit here? Yeah, we'll sit here. You can put that back, Dan. Thank you very much. Edmund Spital, everyone. Mr. Spital, are you employed by the Walters Group?
Yes, I am.
And does your company own the applicant, Holmdel Family Apartments LLC?
Yes, we do.
And what is your title with the Walters Group?
I'm the Vice President of Development.
And are you familiar in that role with the development of this community as well as Walter's other New Jersey communities?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now, this plan shows 3 buildings and 50 apartment units, correct?
That's correct.
Are these family units?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Family means that they're not age restricted.
Okay. And are they income restricted?
Yes, they are income restricted.
And will those income restrictions comply with all the applicable rules governing those income restrictions?
Yes, they will.
And is that a requirement of the court orders and our agreement with the Township of Holmdel?
Yes, it is.
And is that similar to the other communities that the Walters Group has developed in New Jersey?
It certainly is.
Okay. Can you give everybody an idea as to how this community will operate?
Sure. The Walters Group, we handle the development, construction, and management. We're a one-stop shop. We have approximately 24 communities like these, I'll say 2/3 of which are in the Ocean and Monmouth County area. So again, we're responsible for the development, which is what we're doing right now. We're our own GC, handle all the construction in-house. And then we have a substantial management team based in Ocean County. And so we're responsible for qualifying all the tenants, getting the units leased up, reporting to the town in terms of compliance and things such as that. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, and what kind of oversight will there be as to the day-to-day living at this community?
We'll have a property manager that's there during business hours, and we have 24/7 maintenance that's on call.
Okay. How will trash be handled?
Trash, so as you noticed on the site plan, we have a centralized and screened trash enclosure. We do this in all of our communities, both market rate and affordable. And the way that it's handled is the residents drop their trash off there on the way out of their units. And it is, again, it's screened, it's deodorized. It's not like the dumpsters that you would typically see strewn all over apartment sites and with, seagulls and such getting into them. It has key fob access, and only our maintenance staff has the key to operate the compactor. And it's just, we feel it's more expensive to do, but we feel it's a much nicer amenity for the community.
One question that was raised by Mr. Euro is whether the parking spaces will be assigned to particular units. Can you address that?
Sure. We do not assign them. However, we reserve the right in our leases to enforce parking. Very seldom, I think one community, have we ever had an issue, and in that case, we've only, assigned certain buildings to park in certain areas. But we reserve the right in our lease to control the parking situation.
Does that include to limit the number of cars per unit and to tell people where to park and how to park and how many cars they can park?
Yes.
Okay. The amenities for this community, in the northwest corner of the site is proposed Building A, which has not only 8 units, but also community space, correct?
That's correct.
What type of community space do you envision there?
We're talking about the indoor, right?
Indoor.
Sure. So indoor, we have a full gym. We have a computer lab, which usually, we'll have tutoring programs and things like that. Our leasing office, of course, is based out of there. And, just a general community room.
Behind that, there's a playground area. Do you see that in the upper northwest corner of the plan?
Yes, I do.
Can you give everyone an idea of the type of equipment that will utilize there?
Sure. It's usually a couple pieces of swing set equipment. There's usually a slide and some other, things like that. And we typically have a nice rubberized, safe, spongy surface below it for the kids.
And if approved by the board, are you willing to submit the details of that playground equipment and specifications to Ms. Beam or whomever the board directs for their review and approval?
Absolutely.
Okay. The community and recreational space that you just described, is that limited to use by community residents and their guests?
Yes, just our residents.
Okay. That's all the questions I have relating to the operations. Does anyone have any questions about how this community will operate?
Does anyone from your firm live on site?
We don't have anyone living on site at this community. We do have residents that live nearby in Monmouth and Ocean County, but we do not have a designated person living on the site. We do have the 24/7 maintenance access, and they can always call our off-hour numbers.
Well, hearing no other questions, although Mr. Spitel isn't leaving, I'm going to ask our traffic engineer, John McCormick, to step forward to the microphone here for some brief testimony. I don't know if that's on or not. So, John, you testified 2 years ago here, right?
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, Mr. McCormick did qualify as an expert in traffic engineering in August of 2020. I'd be happy to qualify him again if you prefer.
I think everybody's okay with him and his qualifications.
Are you a licensed engineer specializing in traffic engineer in good standing in the state of New Jersey, John?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did you prepare a traffic report relating to this community?
We did.
And
We
are you
prepared.
familiar with the surrounding traffic conditions?
I am.
Can you share briefly your analysis with the board?
Sure. We prepared 2 traffic studies. We prepared one for the original submission. That was dated July of 2020. And we recently submitted a revised study that shifted and redistributed the resident activity to the single driveway. That report was dated December of 21. The good thing about the timing delay is that our traffic counts for the original study are still valid. We counted it before COVID. That's how long ago we did our original study. It was in January of 20, so the COVID restrictions had not been in place. So those traffic counts are probably the most appropriate traffic counts you're going to find within that time period, the last couple of years. So we were lucky and fortunate that the timing actually worked out for that. So basically, I'll just talk through quickly the trip generation of the apartment units, which has not changed. The number of units has stayed the same. The trip generation is very minimal. You're talking about a site such as this. We utilize the ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I'm sure you've heard traffic engineers mention these publications. They are industry standards for this type of estimate. And similarly to 2 years ago, the same 50 units generates 17 trips in the morning. That's a combination of a few entering, mostly about 13 or so exiting. That's in one peak hour. That's the peak of the site for the residents as they exit to go to work. And then as they come home, the evening, it's anticipated to experience about 23 trips. That's about 14 trips entering, the return trip after work. And then in the evening, there's always a little bit more activity, so there's about 9 or 10 trips anticipated to leave. So we're talking about very minor trip generation, 1 trip every couple of minutes, 1 trip every 4 or 5 minutes, and that's the peak hours. So in the off hours, this site is relatively quiet from a traffic perspective. The other aspect I'll talk about is the analysis of the driveways. Obviously, that limited number of activity is going to result in very good, as we call it, levels of service. You've probably heard traffic engineers mention levels of service. Again, it's a range from basically level service A to level service F, very similar to school grading. Essentially, the driveway movements, everything in, out, and past the driveway is levels of service A and B. Excellent levels of service for this type of operation. And also important and critical is the intersection of Middle with Laurel. We did analyze that. The redistributed traffic from the single driveway has very little impact at that intersection. As everyone knows, that intersection has well over 1,000 cars in an hour traveling through it. We're adding 10, 12 trips in an hour. So we're adding a fraction of a percent to that intersection. It will be imperceptible at all levels, our additional traffic to that intersection. I mean, Dan hit lots of what I was supposed to say. So that's the beauty of getting up last in the or later in the order. I don't know if there's anything else I need to put on.
Do you agree that the access and site circulation and parking design are all safe, adequate, in compliance with all applicable standards?
I do. Not to belabor, the access, you know, we went over that numerous times in the redesign. It does meet the RSIS as you see it here. Jen is right that routinely there is a boulevard in a single access development, but those boulevards are intended for developments that are bigger than this. The RSIS allows a multifamily cul-de-sac, which this is, to have 1,000 trips in a day. We have about 1/3 of that. So we do not require the boulevard, which is why you didn't see it initially. However, I think it's a good idea, and we did agree to install that. Internally, as Dan went through, the aisles, 24-foot wide, they allow the 90-degree parking stalls, and all the dimensions are industry standard, and this site will operate safe and efficiently.
Jeff, you had a question? Oh, I thought you. Oh, we answered? Okay, great.
Yeah, the redistribution of the traffic based on the closest number one.
Oh, okay, good.
Yep.
You anticipated his question before he even asked.
That was the reason for my second study. I didn't have to do more traffic counts, but I did a redistribution, absolutely.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else have questions? No? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Our final witness is our architect, Michael Donovan, who will provide some brief testimony about architecture, of course. Excuse me, hey, John.
And you also were in front of us in August?
I believe so, or was my business partner at the time. I may, but I've been a registered architect for 14 years and principal of Donovan Architects.
Okay.
And have appeared before numerous boards before and have current license.
Okay. Everybody okay? Acceptable? Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Donovan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Donovan, are you the project architect?
Yes, I am.
You probably just answered that question. And what do you have on this on the board there? What do you call that?
This is our a rendering perspective and a straight-on elevation, rendered elevation.
Okay, and that's something your office prepared?
Yes.
And that,
yes.
that is a rendering to give everyone an idea of the look and feel of the proposed buildings here?
Yes, and just to one note is this hasn't changed since we got preliminary site plan approval.
Okay.
One thing, the buildings move around, but they are identical. The only thing that we did change is we enclosed the breezeways, and that was sent around earlier to the board to see, and we think that improved the product.
And where are those enclosed breezeways using that exhibit, which is, excuse me, which
Okay,
is
I'm sorry.
page 1 of Exhibit A4. Thank you.
Okay, so in here, this area here and elevation, these two.
Okay.
Those were exterior stairways, and now they're enclosed and conditioned.
Can you give everyone an idea as to the primary exterior features of these elevations and likely building material types that we'll be using?
So we will likely be using fiber cement siding, which is better for the environment. It's a little more expensive than vinyl siding, but it's more durable and better for the environment, and durable brick. We have a brick base throughout the building, and they usually go for LEED, so it's a very sustainable product. It's 2x6 walls. The insulation values are great, and we build a very durable product.
Can you flip to the next page of Exhibit A4, which is the photograph of the other community?
Sure.
Can you tell everybody what this is, please?
Yes, this is a project we built recently. At the time, it wasn't complete when we were doing our initial presentation, but this is Evesham family in Camden County.
Burlington County.
Oh, Burlington County. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I know it was on the border. But this is very similar. This is almost identical in nature, but again, the breezeways would be enclosed.
Now, the ordinance for this zone, I called it the AF earlier, it's the AHMF2 zone has some architectural requirements, some design regulations in section 8.7.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Do we comply with those various regulations?
Yes, we comply. We have, the building is broken up in no more than 50-foot pieces, and you could see from the elevations, it's very pedestrian scale, and it's broken down quite a bit.
Now, the buildings, we have 3 buildings, correct? Why don't we go back to the site plan, if you would?
Oh, sure.
Thank you. I think that's the old one, Mike.
Oh, that is the old one? Okay.
Yeah, should be in the back.
Oh, it's
Probably,
it's-
yeah, probably behind you there. Thanks. So, we have, excuse me, 3 buildings, correct?
Correct.
The settlement agreement states that the building shall be a maximum of 3 stories. Do we comply?
Yes,
And that's also in the ordinance as well, is it not?
correct.
The building shall have a maximum building height of 40 feet as defined in Holmdel's current ordinance as it relates to building height.
And we
And that ordinance says that building height is the vertical distance from the grade plane to the average height of the highest roof structure.
Yes,
Do
and we
these
comply.
buildings comply with that height limitation?
Yes, we do.
What is the building height using that definition?
I believe it's on this page here, but it's, I think it was 33-ish.
Approximately 33?
Yeah, yes.
So significantly less than 40 feet?
Yes.
Okay.
correct.
what are we doing to screen the mechanicals, using whatever exhibit you choose?
In these areas where the stairways are, there's a shed roof that it comes down, and then there's a flat roof where the condensers sit, and it's not visible. Like, as you can see, the condensers are in there, and they're not visible at all. They're in it, like in a pit in the roof.
Okay. Now, is it correct that your exhibits, Exhibit A4, are intended to let everybody know what these buildings are going to look like, right?
Yes.
Is it also correct that,
Building height for a minute.
if I could just finish with this question, then I'll go back to building height. And that was my last question, so I'll get right back to it. Is it correct that we obviously haven't completed construction drawings yet, so there may be some deviation from what you see on your exhibits, but there'll be substantial conformance, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're very close to finishing up. We're about to submit for permit.
Okay,
So,
great, great. Now, Ms. Beam had a question about building height, let's get to that.
It's a 3-story building and you're saying it's 30 feet high?
33 feet. Yeah, to the midpoint of the roof. Yeah.
To the midpoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I want to make sure the record's clear on this, okay? Because the ordinance defines, at least what I saw, the building height as the vertical distance from the grade plane to the average height of the highest roof structure.
Correct. Yes.
Unlike some ordinance which refer to, in pitch roof situations, a midpoint.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Yep.
I need to know what the building height is. So we can move on to something else if you want to look that up, but I want to make sure the record's clear that we comply with the building height.
In any event, it's less than the 45 feet that's required in the zone.
Absolutely. Yes.
40 feet, I believe.
Your plans say 45 feet.
Well, that may be, but, and if so, we'll correct those. But I can tell you that in our settlement agreement with Hazlet, we agreed that the building shall have a maximum building height of 40 feet as defined in Holmdel's current zoning ordinance. So if our plans say 45, we'll correct that to be 40.
Yeah.
I
It
don't
says
know if the
45, it says 45 feet for 3.5 stories.
Correct. That's what it says in the plans.
You know, my guess is, and this is a guess, that may come from the ordinance, but we've agreed to be less than that, so we're going to be 3 stories and 40 feet. Is that correct, Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Or no more than either
Correct,
3 stories or
correct.
40 feet?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then the final exhibit is a floor plan of a typical building. And our unit mix and square footage all comply with HMFA standards, NJHMFA standards. They're very marketable, and they look and feel like market rate housing, if not better.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Madam,
Del Duca,
yes.
The architectural plans say 36 feet 3 inches to the midpoint of the highest roof.
Okay, so we'll revise those plans to put the dimension to the highest roof structure, so.
No, that's right. It's
No,
done
that's correct.
correctly.
Okay.
It's 36 feet 3 inches, not 33 feet.
Okay.
I just want
Okay.
the record to be clear.
Is that to the highest point?
It's
That's to the
midpoint
that's
of
to the height
highest roof,
height divide as
which is the exact definition that you just read.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
Right, the average height of the highest roof structure.
Yes.
Thank you, got it. I'm a lawyer, math's not my thing. Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
very much.
So, Madam Chair and everyone, that concludes our plan presentation. We realize that you may want to hear from your professionals and the public. We reserve the right to comment further if necessary. But we appreciate the time you've given us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Del Duca. Jen or Bob, you have anything else to add?
Nothing on my part.
Mine either.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open it up to, for questions, and given the lateness of the hour, and since we have another application coming, if you have questions or comments. So, before I was so rudely interrupted, no, I'm kidding. If you have a question or a comment at this time, you can make it. So, ask your question, and then if you have a comment, we'll swear you in, and you can make your comment. So, just raise your hand, and I'll call on you. Ma'am? And for the record, state your name and address, please.
is Amy Hune. I'll spell it for you, Huhn, 14 Walter Drive in Hazlet. I just have a couple questions and comments. Of course. I do. Okay, so I understand you had stated about possibly moving the trees over by the South Laurel Avenue area. My concern with that is how is that going to affect the lighting on the neighbors across the street on South Laurel Avenue? Because where my house is positioned, that lighting would go right into my bedroom area. So I'm concerned about that, if that's going to change it.
The way you look at the plan, there's no light that's going to shine across the street to you. Even,
Okay, I didn't have
look
the
at it,
plan,
so-
so I,
right,
yeah, so I wasn't able to see that. So my house, okay, where you see over on the right-hand side, South Laurel Avenue, okay? My house is exactly next to and right behind there on Walter Drive, which is next to the Walter Nursing Home, the Arnold
I
Nursing
drive
Home.
past your house often.
So our house is the dead-end street right
You can
behind
walk over and
South
point it
Laurel.
out for us,
Okay.
please.
So those trees are way south, or
Mr. Doherty, can you show on the aerial, perhaps, Ms. Yoon, where the trees that we're planning on just moving?
So you had stated over here
No.
possibly moving
Just, we're just gonna move. Okay. But come back, microphone, please. And Mr. Doherty, can you please just answer her question about the lighting? Will
I
the
agree.
lighting spill over now over to her property from where she
No.
is?
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you. I know the question was brought up regarding the mosquitoes. So, you know, as the weather does tend to get damper and during hurricane season, I know my home alone, we do get quite a bit of mosquitoes in our yard. So I wasn't sure if there would be intermittent testing or would there be any type of mosquito pesticides that would be used?
No, there's no proposed pesticides to be used. There is maintenance, routine maintenance that's performed as part of the stormwater system. As you might have experienced with other stormwater designs in the past, there's an operations and maintenance manual that's required to be put in place and deed restricted, especially with CAFRA, to make sure that the system is maintained per DEP standards for maintenance.
Okay. My next question was, I know they have to go in and take care of the soil that's contaminated. So is there going to be any ongoing testing once the land has been built upon to make sure nothing comes up from the ground underneath?
There's standards set aside by NJDEP for the licensed site remediation professional to enforce, to complete all of the remediation to those standards. I'm not an expert in those standards, so I can't speak to you about them or describe them to you.
Okay. And how often, I know you have a compactor for the garbage, how often is that garbage picked up and everything? What is it going to be, once a week, twice a week?
It's usually about twice a week.
Okay. And I wasn't here 2 years ago, but what type of additional transistors are going to be put in place so that you're not draining from our electric that goes into our homes?
That's up to First Energy, who provides our service. We have no impact to that or say upon how that service is delivered to us. Same for any utility.
Okay, is that something that you would have ahead of time before you start building onto the property?
The applicant will make application to utility providers, including the gas company, as well as First Energy for power, and then they determine how to bring that power to our site. It's completely out of the applicant's hands.
Okay, and then my only other concern is that if pickup of the students is going to be on Middle Road, that's going to cause additional congestion because we already have the school buses that come through for Middle Road Elementary School, as well as the middle school and as well as to the high school. So would it be possible to have some kind of
We're unable to provide any direction for school bus traffic or designation for school bus stops because it's not within our purview to provide that.
Okay, but is that
Or the planning board.
Or the planning boards, that's completely governed by the Board of Education.
And their private vendor. So the private vendor that the Board of Education, the bus company that the Board of Education hires determines those bus stops.
Okay, well then, would there be some kind of shoulder on the road then? Who would make that determination? You know, because you're going to be completely stopping traffic if you're at the entrance to pick up the students. Is there going to be any kind of shoulder that they would be able
that's
to?
the procedures for school bus school bus pickup and drop off at bus stops is, no different than it would be anywhere. The school bus, whether there's a shoulder available or not, there's no traffic permitted to pass that school bus, regardless of the width of the travel lane. The most safe thing to have is the narrow travel lane, so there's no temptation to go around either side of the school bus. But again, that's out of our hands. That's the cartway on Middle Road.
Okay, and then the last thing I had, and it was just a suggestion of mine, was I know you have the stores that are going to be in front of the complex. Okay, we have the pizzeria, the
Well, they're on the
dance
corner.
studio,
We're kind of
the
behind them.
Right.
We're
But I'm
facing
saying
really
for emergency
Middle Road.
entrance, we have all of that is paved right now. There's a back parking lot that's paved.
That's actually our property. So the
Okay.
the pavement area that's separate from the back of the shopping center.
Yes.
That's on the property that's part of this application. So
Right.
that pavement that's now a wetlands buffer is going to be removed.
Right, you said that's all going to be removed, but would that be an option to, rather than taking the trees down from the South Laurel Avenue, to have an emergency exit?
No, it
entrance
doesn't.
there?
It doesn't line up with all of our improvements. It's the back of our buildings. First of all, I understand where you're going or what you mean because we actually looked at many options in laying out the site. Michael and Ed and I all looked at many different options, which included driveways that were maybe over the existing asphalt, et cetera. But it doesn't really work. It creates too many bends. It's not really an efficient use of the space. So
No, that's fine. That's all I have. Thank you.
no problem.
Anyone else have questions or comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public portion. Any other questions from the board?
I do. Do you expect some residents not to come with cars, and how is that handled?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I just didn't hear you.
Yeah, do you accept residents here who do not have their own transportation?
Sure, we do.
And how is that handled? They take care of their own transportation?
They do, and in some cases, well, it's more so on our age-restricted communities, we have shuttle services, but I believe there is a bus stop within a half mile of this site. You're welcome.
And I just want a quick, there's no elevator, correct?
There's no elevator in these buildings, correct?
Okay, so handicap access would be just the first level, okay?
That's
And then for first responders taking it's 3 levels of houses this way, right? Like, you're on 1 level?
Yes.
So for a first responder to take someone to the hospital, they'd have to walk down the hallway and down the stairs.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I have a motion to approve the Holmdel Family Apartments amended preliminary and final major site plan? With
I'll move with the conditions that were raised.
And so Jen, to clarify, so we had said there may be 2 light-in waivers, but there really three with the height plus the two ratios?
So it's two, they're within the same section of the ordinance, the ratios are the same section. Yeah,
We'll consider that one.
it's one, yeah. It's section 30-135A 7E1, those are the ratios. And then there's section 30-135A 7E1 as well, which is the height of the ratio.
And that was all I had as my notes as well. Thank you.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Thank you all very much. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Good night.
We're just going to take a quick health break.
tomorrow's Wednesday. Probably gotta play golf or something.
I wish. Next week we start.
First, okay? Is that the day?
Is that the day you told us outside? No, fine.
Because you said Heavenly Estates Block 1.
Yeah, we're gonna do some heavy duty changes to that. Yeah, that's fine.
So that was carried to that night, so we could always carry it again.
Okay. Yeah. We got these piece of shit wooden chairs. They slide comfortable up and down and recline. They're here all night. Go home, Joyce. Go home, Joyce.
I am going home now.
So, we're going soon too. 5 minutes.
Since Millstone, I moved up to Hunterdon County, and then went down to Maryland, and then came back here.
Oh my God. Job related? Yeah. Good. And you're retired now or no? Still
That's
working?
my 5th job. I'm fully employed. I run a nonprofit, Monmouth Conservation Foundation.
I thought I saw your name on it.
And it's my 5th job since I retired. I can't sit still.
You're like Elton John. He's like farewell tours. It's like 20 farewell. They go concert guys. They do a farewell tour. They take a year off. They do another one.
That's a marketing ploy.
Yeah, I know. And they get paid a few more bucks.
Yeah, yeah. So how's Jim doing?
He's still working.
Yeah?
He comes in at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, takes a nap, and leaves at 4. Leaves at 4:30.
Say hello.
I will. Thanks, Bill. Yeah. What phone of yours? Yeah.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Item number 3 on the agenda, and thank you for those that are here sitting and being so patient. Mumford Homes, which is preliminary and final major subdivision number 662, block 50.19, lots 39 and 40. It's a proposal to consolidate 2 existing lots and then subdivide to create 6 residential lots. The property is located along the eastbound side of Bethany Road and approximately 500 feet north of the intersection with Telegraph Hill.
I didn't see the survey.
This is the completeness waivers section. However, our esteemed co-chair has a conflict, and so she is going to recuse herself.
Good night, everybody.
Does anybody else have a conflict that you know of? Well, for the record, I told DJ that we probably wouldn't start this before 9:30, and so that if he wanted to go home, he could, and he took me up on it, so. I also told Kate Keller that she could go home because we're, at this point, probably only gonna do completeness waivers and then carry the application.
Good
Mr.
evening.
Alfieri, good evening.
Salvatore Alfieri on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you for being so patient this evening.
No problem. We have several completeness requests that we're seeking relief from.
Mr. Alfieri, if you could just move the mic closer to you. I don't even know if it's still on.
It's
Okay,
still
just
on.
closer. Thank you.
In the Collier's letter dated April 28th on page 2, there are 3 completeness items that are listed. One was a traffic report. We have since, and it's referenced here, we've provided that, so we don't believe a waiver is required. The other relates to the LOI. LOI is pending with the DEP, and we're told that it's on the desk for signing, but we don't know when that'll come. But we're comfortable that our plans are consistent with the LOI that was applied for. Will serve letters from the utility companies. If the board wanted them, we can get them, but they could, normally you just condition approval on a will serve letter for utilities. And then the final thing was a fiscal impact report, which we're seeking a waiver for since it's a 6-lot subdivision. It's not a large project, and typically in other towns we don't provide them. But again, if the board wanted it, we could certainly put one together. But it's, again, 6-lot subdivisions typically not done. Was there, you mentioned there was a survey too, right? That we talked about?
In addition to the LOI, we also mentioned in our first letter, and I apologize, it was inadvertently left out of the April 28th letter, was a flood hazard area verification.
Right, and that's piggybacking with the LOI also applied for and expected at the same time.
And yes, the survey waiver request was for a survey not less than 5 years old and prepared by a New Jersey licensed land surveyor.
Right, and our survey's older than 5 years old, but the property hasn't changed from when it was originally approved. The only thing that's changed is there were structures on the property reflected on this survey that have since been demolished, but the property boundaries obviously have not been changed in any way.
And we would have no objection to that waiver being granted, Madam Chair.
Does anyone else have an, okay.
So if the waivers are granted, then we're going to request that the application be carried, I believe, to the June 21st meeting so that we can make the actual presentation of the application, unless you want to stay late tonight, which I don't, so.
So at this time, our board engineer has no issues. Does anyone else have any issues with the completeness waivers? Okay, so I need a motion to accept the completeness waivers and deem the application complete.
Motion.
Okay,
Second.
So Ron and Jeff. Roll call, please. Oh, so I'm going to seat Ms. O'Connor for Ms. Blusas. And Mr. Nicholas is still seated for Mr. Lucarelli.
Yes.
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 Yes. So at this time, even though all of you so patiently waited to hear the application, we're going to actually carry the, I'm sorry?
We need to accept jurisdiction first.
Right, so we're,
Carry it. So we probably should read it, just for the record, we should read the last agenda item, and then
okay,
we'll accept, notices were fine, accept jurisdiction, and then.
okay. All right, so just a little bit of technical issue, but we are going to move this to June 21st, which will be the first and probably the only item on the agenda that day. So when you come at 7, you won't have to sit for 2.5 hours. It will be moved. Mm-hmm. So, item number 4, Mumford Homes, preliminary and final subdivision, number 662, block 50.19, lots 39 and 40. Proposal to consolidate 2 existing lots, then subdivide to create 6 residential lots. The property is located along the eastbound side of Bethany Road, approximately 500 feet north of the intersection of Telegraph Hill Road. Since this is our first public hearing on the application, I'd like to ask the board members whether they have any potential conflict that we need to discuss involving the property owner. Anybody? Okay. Does the applicant know of any potential conflicts?
No.
And is the, are we, is there any member of the public aware of any conflicts? No. Okay. So, all notices, all escrows? Okay. All righty.
So we can accept jurisdiction.
Right, so just to formally announce to the public that there will not be a new notice, and this is their notice for that night.
So, how this works is that you won't get another letter for those of you that are here. This is, you're being told, so if you know other people and anybody that's following this on the live stream, this is your notification that this application will be continued. Zach. will be continued until the June 21st meeting at 7 PM here in the courtroom. I need a motion to, without further notice, so we need a motion to move the public, to what am I saying? To continue the public hearing to June 21st. Bill? Ron?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Velt. Thank you for your patience, and
My
thank you
pleasure.
all
Thank
for
you.
your. Okay. Thank you. The only thing we have left is the April 15th minutes. I know that April 5th, it says 15th in the thing, okay. Okay, so I made a couple of changes, Bob made some changes, Bill made some changes. Does anybody else have any changes to the minutes? Okay, seeing none, I need a motion to adopt the minutes as amended.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Since I let the planner go home, I'm sure that she doesn't have a report. Engineer?
No report tonight, Madam Chair.
And what about you?
No report.
None. Okay. So in that case, a reminder, so now we have to make a motion we have to cancel the May 17th meeting? Okay. There is nothing on the agenda for May 17th. So due to lack of agenda, we will need to cancel it. I could care less because I was going to be. So I need a motion to cancel May 17th.
Well, second.
Okay, Jeff and Ron. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So our next meeting will be June 21st because there is no meeting on June 7th because of primary day. So we'll see you all here on June 21st. Right, Bonnie? Okay, great. Thank you. I need a motion to adjourn, please.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Great.